This afternoon we're going to do some very interesting things. We're going to cover some of the aspects of the Buddhist teachings that are foundational to the way we think. And that's the purpose for my presenting them as I am presenting them. The teaching that I'm about to touch on, and I really mean it when I say touch on, is about the 6 realms of cyclic existence. In order to teach that teaching thoroughly, it really would take weeks. In order to teach that teaching in a minimal way, it would take at least several teachings. So what we're going to do now is less than minimal. It's really not for the purpose of giving the teaching or rendering the teaching in any kind of complete form, but more to demonstrate why Buddhists think as they do. So what it's supposed to do is to have the effect of shaping the way you think. The responsibility then for thinking about what you're about to hear today again and again and again in order to infuse your thinking is yours. If we were to engage in a series of teachings that would take maybe several weeks to complete, then I would say you would have enough time to develop a habitual tendency about thinking in a certain way. But even then, you would have the responsibility of keeping in your mind certain kinds of ideas. But since we only have a brief time to really touch on the teaching, now you have an even greater responsibility. I should tell you that the way that you can use this teaching the best is to allow it to permeate your thoughts by reminding yourself constantly, and that will take some effort on your part, enough to where when you make decisions and when you view things, you will view things accordingly. You will view things according to what you have heard here today. And it will be quite different, really, from what you're used to. You must understand that one of the problems that we have, and of course any problem that any practitioner has in terms of being able to embrace their practice, is a result of the karma of their mind stream. What you see when you look at the obstacles to your practice is really a reflection of very old habitual tendencies that you yourself have developed and that you yourself carry with you. So there's no one to blame. It doesn't really pay to blame our society. It doesn't really pay to blame anyone that keeps us from our practice. It doesn't really pay to blame our parents because they weren't Buddhist. It doesn't really pay to blame our job because it doesn't give us enough time. What we're really looking at is an externalization of the internal content of our mind stream. You see? If we're too busy to practice, if we're too materialistic to really get the big picture, if we stumble over these things again and again and again, then we're looking in a mirror, and we have to understand that. We have to understand that we, instead of labeling these situations that we run into again and again and again as reasons why we can't make it on the path, instead we have to view them as being reflections of the content of our mind stream. So who are we looking at when we see these things in our lives? We're looking at ourselves. We're looking at our minds. We're looking at what we're all about. And what we should do then is to use that as a tool by which we can learn to practice effectively. When you see a reflection that, when you understand from what your life is reflecting to you that you have certain problems and you have certain obstacles and you have certain conceptual beliefs and habitual tendencies that block you, well, what do you think the thing is to do? You don't stop. You don't say, well, I give up, I don't have enough time. You don't say, well, I give up because I can't quite get that concept. Instead, you recognize that this is a habitual tendency, and you apply the antidote. You apply the antidote to the best of your ability, which for some people will be jumping in hog wild and really going for it, and sometimes maintaining that pace, and sometimes backing off later because they have to. Sometimes taking a good amount of time to acclimate themselves to what their pace can naturally be. And for other people, it means one tiny little bite at a time. Each of us has a certain tendency, a certain habitual tendency And that's where you're starting, and wherever you're starting is where you're starting, and that has to be okay because that's where it is. So from that scenario, I have developed my 3 cardinal rules. These are not the Buddhist teachings, this is my teaching. And they are this: give yourself a break, do the best you can, and don't let yourself get away with murder. This is not the Buddhist teaching. I made this all up by myself. I take complete responsibility for it. But it actually works very well if you follow it. So do that. You are where you are. Give yourself a break. Really do the best you can. Do what you can do. And watch yourself, because you will try to get away with murder. So these are the ways that you should approach the path. When you hear ideas that are different than what you're used to, and you will, the best thing to do is not to get yourself all tightly wrapped up and constipated about stuff. Again, give yourself a break. You've been going in a different direction for these many aeons. And do yourself a favor, just relax. Just be okay. You have that choice. You can relax. You can hear the teachings and you can utilize them to the best of your ability. But on the other hand, don't let yourself get away with the kind of thought that really blocks you from utilizing the teaching. Because you will start that kind of thought. You were brought up in a materialistic society. That is the karma of your mind. You were brought up with certain beliefs that may be different than what you hear here. That is the karma of your mind. And the tendency would be to say, well, that doesn't sound right to me, or that sounds foreign to me, or I'm just not used to this, or well, I just can't get that. Well, don't let yourself be stopped by tripping over your own brain. But that doesn't make any sense at all. When you enter into a spiritual path, you have to expect to be challenged. You have to expect that because you're here to change, aren't you? If you weren't here to change, then you shouldn't be here. Because if you're not here to change, you want to continue as you are, an ordinary sentient being involved in cyclic existence with the all-pervasive suffering of cyclic existence. If you're asking about the path, then you must be considering entering onto a path that really leads to enlightenment, that brings about enlightenment. Believe me when I tell you, if what your goal, and if you have discovered for yourself that your goal is supreme realization, and you yourself want to be free of the sufferings of cyclic existence, if what you want is the cessation of suffering, Buddhahood, then, brothers and sisters, change you must. So if you are here to do that, get used to the word. It's going to be your best friend at times. So effectively, if you really are on the path with any kind of serious intention, then you want to change. When you hear these teachings, then, don't trip yourself up. Do you understand what I'm saying by that? Don't conceptualize in such a hard and fast way that you fall over yourself. Allow yourself the option of fluidity and spaciousness that you need. Also, you must consider this, and this is an important first aspect of the teaching that we're having today. There are many things that you can do in this life. Of that, there is no doubt. No one can question that. We are, in America, the land of opportunity and all that stuff. And we are living in an affluent culture. These are modern times, and it's also Kali Yuga, or that is the age of degeneration. There are many different options that you can embrace. And you can become rich if you set your mind to it. You can become rich, assuming that the karma is in there somewhere. You can become highly educated. Again, assuming that the karma is in there somewhere, that the causes have been built up on some level. You can completely submerge yourself in artistic endeavors. You can go into computer programming. You can become a bag person on the street. You can take drugs. You can become an alcoholic. You can become a freeloader. You can maybe make a movie. You can be a gardener. There's lots of different stuff that you can do. There's a myriad of things that you can do. In America, you can also be a spiritual person. And in America, as in very few other countries, there are a million ways to do that. When the Lamas first came to this country, one of the saddest things that they saw about America is that there are so many different ways to think that you're being spiritual. When they saw what Americans were dealing with in terms of ways that they could go and feel that they were adapting a spiritual path, they were appalled and felt that this was the unfortunate, unbearable, bad karma of the American people. Doesn't that sound odd? We would think, well, no, that's just the opposite. We can do anything we want to. We can be spiritual over here, or we can be spiritual over here, or we can be traditional spiritual, we can be non-traditional spiritual. We can do anything we want to. This is the land of opportunity. But in fact, from the Lama's point of view, most of what you see in America today that goes for spirituality was started by someone less than 50 years ago. Have you thought about that? Started by someone less than 50 years ago. Essentially, that means that no one has had time to figure out if it will ever produce enlightenment. So what that means is there are a lot of Americans that are honestly and diligently trying to cross the ocean of suffering in a boat that has never made it across a lake yet. And we don't even know if it's seaworthy. It's something to think about. Even the religions in America that are older than that have a different set of goals. And there is some confusion as to what goal to pick. There is a lot of confusion even within other traditional traditions. If you think about the teachings of Christianity, even the great leaders of the church will agree that the original teachings that Jesus gave primarily are not what you find in the Bible. That they have been lost, and with many translations, the true meaning has been clouded over. That over time, portions of it have been deleted from their text. And that these are unfortunate situations that modern-day Christian practitioners are dealing with even now. And even so, most of the people that receive the teachings have no idea that one can become profoundly involved in any kind of mysticism that would actually change their perception. None of them really, very few of them actually know that they can practice in such a way as to achieve any kind of realization. The Lamas, when they first came to this country, in all truth and honesty, looked at what we were up against and thought maybe it would be very hard for people here in America to really listen to the Buddha's teachings. There are many things that seem much more flashy. There are many things that promise a great deal more. If you look at some of the popular ideas that are coming out in the New Age, in this New Age, there are ideas that are coming out that promise everything from instant healing to talking to masters from the great beyond. All of which is very flashy and very showy. But once again, we have to use discrimination. Has anything like that produced enlightenment yet? Have we seen the signs? When the Lamas came to America, they came to America having themselves, with their own eyes, seen signs, seen things that convinced them of the extraordinariness of what was placed before them. For instance, both of my root gurus have seen Lamas fly through the air with their own eyes, have seen them. I know in one case of a very close student of one of my root gurus who has seen one of my root gurus come off the ground and remain there for some time. Many of them have seen the miraculous appearance of the rainbow body after the time of death. It is not uncommon to see that. In our tradition, recently a Lama died, and his body produced a miraculous relic at the time of his death. He was cremated in a fire so hot that his very bones turned to crispy stuff that looked a little bit like a cross between ashes and potato chips. I have a piece of the bone, so I know. But his heart remained raw and uncooked. Many lamas have seen and have in their possession, myself included, relics of the bodies of lamas who have died, and their bodies automatically produced pearls that, when kept in a dark and quiet place, will continue to reproduce themselves. Many of the lamas that I know have seen with their own eyes stupas being built whose empowerment was so strong and precious that from the stupa on one side would come a sweet nectar and on the other side would come a sour nectar that would constantly flow and would never dry up. And there was no explanation for it. This has been happening for hundreds of years, sometimes thousands of years. From that perspective, when a Buddhist speaks of a true path, a Buddhist doesn't speak of a true path in the sense of saying, my religion is better than your religion. It isn't a haughty or prideful thing like that. But they're looking at certain criteria, you see, and for a Buddhist, that criteria is essential. What we want is we want to be practicing a path that can and has produced that kind of result again and again and again. Visible result that can be seen with one's eyes. To my way of thinking, and this is how I view it, I'm actually not, and I will share this to you kind of family style. We're sitting around here being a little bit family style. I'm not a religious person. Isn't that odd for me to say? Well, I'm not. I'm not cut out to be a religious person. It isn't really within my personality to be rigidly dogmatic. For me, actually, the opposite, and once you get to know me, you'll see that. I don't act like other lamas. I'm just like the way I am. I don't know whether that's good or bad, but I do know this about myself. I'm actually a very practical person. And for me, seeing is believing. And for me, talk is cheap. I don't give a big flip about talk. Being as practical as I am, and as non-religious as I am, I can tell you very clearly why I chose the Buddha Dharma. And that is because, as practical as I am, if I am going to cross the ocean of suffering, I am not going to do it in a boat that has holes in it. And I am not going to do it in a boat that has never been tried. I am going to take the safest, best, most certified, grade A boat that you can possibly find, simply because I'm just that practical. And if there is a technology that is represented by that boat that one actually has to implement in an intelligent and disciplined way, if that's what the boat is, then I'm going to do that, not because I'm religious. I'm really not into religion. I'm going to do that because it works. That's how I view the Buddha's teaching. When we consider the Buddha's teaching, we consider it to be not ordinary. That is to say, an ordinary person simply didn't just show up one day and tell everybody they had the answer. It didn't come from an idea that someone had. It didn't come from an experience that someone had. It didn't come from a compilation of people's views or any kind of intellectual process like that. These teachings arise from the mind of enlightenment. There are many that call themselves enlightened. And the moment a person calls themselves enlightened, that's where I stop believing them. The Buddha only said about himself, I am awake. He never made himself out to be a god, and he never said that he was any different from anyone else. He simply said, I've given you the path, now basically work out your own salvation. There was no doubt that the Buddha is the Buddha, in that from his teachings, over the past 2,500 years, many lamas and their students after them have come to realization and have attained nirvana, witnessed by the signs at the time of their death, miraculous signs. I will not follow a path that has not produced that kind of result, because I wouldn't want to waste this precious human rebirth. That would be stupid. When we consider the Buddha's teachings, we consider it this way, that the movement or the appearance of the teaching should be viewed like this. Inherent within all things is the seed of Buddha nature. All things are essentially in their nature the Buddha. All sentient beings are within their nature the Buddha. That means all human beings to unseen, non-physical beings, of which there are all kinds, whether you believe in them or not. Just because you've never seen China doesn't mean it's not there. There are all kinds of sentient beings that are non-physical. There are animals. There are microscopic little sentient beings that are running around on the tips of our noses even now as we speak. And they are all in their nature the Buddha. So all things having as their core or their essence the Buddha nature, then we should consider that nature to be the basis or the seed. Since the Buddha was enlightened, his revelation of the path came directly from that awareness. Whereas, even though we ourselves have that same nature, whatever revelations we put forth now arise from our fixation on thinking of ourselves as a self, our fixation and our ego clinging. Even though our nature is the same as the Buddha, any idea that we have now, any conceptualization, any consideration, anything that comes from us, comes from a process of fixation, that fixation on self-nature as being inherently real. But the Buddha, when he gave the path, did so after he attained enlightenment. And so it arises from that miraculous enlightened intention, and it arises from that state of enlightenment. The path itself is considered to be the movement or the method. All the Dharma teachings that you receive here, traditional teachings, and even some commentary teachings that I may give, actually arise from the Buddha's teaching or have as their basis the Buddha's teaching. And so they are considered to be precious in that they are the method that arises from the mind of enlightenment. So the path is considered to be the method or the means, that the Dharma is called the path. The result of practicing this path is enlightenment. You can only, and that is called the fruit of the path, but you can only receive or achieve rather the result of enlightenment. You can only have that result if the method arose from the mind of enlightenment. And you can only be certain that that is the case if you have seen the result proven again and again and again. Because we ourselves cannot recognize the Buddha nature. Not in ourselves and not in any other being, not yet. All we have to go on is a proven, result-bringing method. When we look at the path, at the movement of Dharma activity, rather, as being divided into these three things, these three sections, what we consider is that the basis, or the cause, the basis, brings forth the movement or the method, the path, which results in the fruit or the goal. If we really look at it, the fruit or the goal is not separate from the basis itself, because what is the goal? The goal is to awaken to that natural state, which is the inherent state. It's the same. Have you gone anywhere? No, you haven't gone anywhere. Have you progressed? Not at all. Have you even moved? No. Because in the realization, in the forthcoming of the fruit, in the awakening to the primordial wisdom state, one realizes that the natural state or the intrinsic nature and the movement or the method which arises from that nature and the fruit or the goal are completely inseparable. And they are the same, indistinguishable one from the other. We never, therefore, as Buddhists, consider that we are going to some outside goal. We never make the mistake that those who are involved in a more Western idea of linear development make when they think that they are building a higher self, you see, or even building a connection to a higher self. And we never make the mistake of thinking that we are becoming great beings or advanced beings or masters in the sense that linear thinking depicts. Because from our point of view, we haven't moved at all. Enlightenment is not the gathering together of a bunch of facts, the same as you do when you're in college. It isn't even the gathering together of a bunch of experiences, which some people seem to think that we are the sum total of our experiences. Well, yes, that's true, but that's true in a karmic way. When we attain enlightenment, that enlightenment is actually the awakening to the naked state. The state that is free of all experience. The state that is like pure luminosity and not like accumulated objective, subjective experience. The naked awareness. So we haven't gone anywhere except to pacify the peculiar, chronic, and compulsive fixation that we have on self-nature, and particularly subjective, objective experience, and the desire that arises from that. That's what we have done upon awakening. There is no movement. There is no meaning other than that. There is no building. There is no tearing down. Nothing of the accumulation that we value within our life is part of that. It is only the pacification of this hard, effortful, chronic, compulsive fixation that is the sum total of all the experience we have ever had since time out of mind. That is a very profound difference between Buddhist philosophy and, let's say, Western metaphysical or religious thinking. There are some people that say, well, in your tradition, is Buddha like God? No, Buddha is not God. Well, is Guru Rinpoche God? No, Guru Rinpoche is not God. Well, what do you call God in your tradition? We don't call anything God. There are gods, but that's not the goal. Now, people try to find a way around that, Western thinkers, they'll try to find a way around that. And what they often say to me is something like, well, okay, all right, then what's the goal? Enlightenment. Okay, then enlightenment is God. No, it's not. The goal is not anything so personalized and externalized as that. There is no other. The moment we are caught up in self and other, we have lost the essential nature. We are then fixated in duality. We are talking about awakening, which is to pacify such fixation. It becomes then somewhat difficult to communicate this gossamer thin yet all-important fundamental distinction. But as someone who wishes to begin the path or is considering beginning the path or is actually a practitioner on the path, you must understand that difference so that you do not make the mistake of not understanding what your true objects of refuge are. When you practice the Buddha's teaching, in the beginning and all through your practice, you will say, I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, and I take refuge in the Sangha. What does that mean? What that means is that you have looked at the faults of cyclic existence and you have seen that it's pretty messy and that it produces no real happiness, and that according to the Buddha, you have determined that the Buddha has said that there is a cessation to suffering, and that cessation is enlightenment. And that is also the cessation of desire. So you've decided you're going to go for it. You're going to go for enlightenment. And that means that you have to see the faults of cyclic existence, and you have to think about them. You have to get that through your old being, because that old being does not want to hear the story. You have to kind of force it down your throat. It's kind of like taking medicine that, until you get used to it, tastes bad. Kind of hold your nose and rub your throat a little bit till you swallow it. You can laugh about that. It's really okay. It's like that in the beginning. Really it is. And then you have to consider that having decided to take that medicine, you're really going to look towards these holders of that medicine, or these deliverers of that medicine. We look to the Buddha, and that means all those who have attained Buddhahood, not just the historical Shakyamuni Buddha, all those who have attained Buddhahood. We look to the Buddha, we look to the Dharma, which is the revelation or the teaching that is brought forth from the mind of enlightenment that is purely tried and true and has brought result. And then we look to the Sangha, which is the spiritual and religious community that we all then become part of, who are responsible for treasuring and holding in a stable way and propagating the teachings. In the Vajrayana tradition, we also say, I take refuge in the Lama. And the Lama is representative of those three. Without the Lamas, you would not hear the Buddha's teaching. You would not even hear about the Buddha. Without the Lama, there would be no Sangha. So the Lama is representative of all three. When you say, I take refuge in these, what you're saying is, I choose enlightenment. I choose the cessation of suffering. That is my choice. And you move away from the faults of cyclic existence and remain focused on the ultimate goal. In a deeper sense, however, you must understand that what you are ultimately taking refuge in is enlightenment itself, which, in understanding enlightenment as the fruit, one also understands it as the path, but one also understands it as the intrinsic nature. So you are taking refuge in the nature of your own mind, in that nature. To understand that thoroughly, you can never be duped. But it does not mean that you do not have to work very diligently and with discipline toward the goal. The method is very technical. It's very involved. It isn't easy. Why isn't it easy? I'll tell you why. Because what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to cut through aeons and uncountable aeons of specific, compulsive absorption in self-nature. Think about that. We're not talking about a Tootsie Roll here. We're talking about something that's supposed to cut like a knife. It's got to be powerful. And it is powerful. You have to think about, I don't know, if you're a housewife and you want to think about cleaning house, you have to think about, you've got a floor that's been dirty for a very long time. You just moved into this place and the floor's never been washed in 150 years. Try to imagine that, women of the world. And you've got to find some super, hyper, industrial strength cleaner that's going to cut through that. Well, do you think that's the kind of stuff that you'd like to take a bath in? No, it's going to be strong. You have to think of Dharma that way. Of course, that's a poor analogy. But it's got to be strong, and the technology has to be real. There have to be things that you do. You can't just be talking about it. You've got to be doing it. Because it has so much to do. And the thing about the Dharma is that it works when you apply it. It does not work when you talk about it. It does not work when you think about it exclusively. It does not work when you join up with others who are doing it. It does not work when you talk the talk and rap the rap, and sing the song and dance the dance. It works when you do. And it's just like scrubbing that floor. If you really put some elbow grease into it, you're going to get some good results. If you don't, forget it. On the other hand, it's very flexible. Don't let it scare you. You have the right, and you will never be forced to go any deeper than you want to go. You have the right to practice gently and peripherally, and thereby you will be accumulating causes for some future incarnation where you will again appear as a human being with these auspicious conditions, and you will be able to practice very well and very diligently. There are lots of people involved in the center that only do very small, very gentle practice and are involved in a peripheral way. And that's fine. There's a large tradition of that in the Buddha Dharma. Many, many people that are only peripherally involved in their practice. Then there are other people that are more deeply involved in a mediocre way. They practice very well. They practice maybe an hour or so a day, and they really are doing a good job, and they're faithful, and that's it. And then there are other people that practice many hours a day, and they do nothing but try to propagate the teaching, try to work very hard here, try to give what they can to make this to make the Dharma spread and be fruitful. And you have your choice. You can do whatever you want to. This is a philosophy. You should think of the Buddhist teaching as a philosophy that you can follow according to your capability. And you don't have to look a certain way, and you don't have to act a certain way. It's just what you learn basically are cause and effect. For instance, the Buddha teaches, and I had this written down because sometimes I can remember 7 out of 8 things, or 6 out of 8, or sometimes 5 out of 8 on a bad day. But these are the things that, according to our Ngundro, our preliminary teaching, we are taught bring about the positive result of realization, of awareness, if done consistently, again and again and again. And that is composition, that is to say, to compose prayers, to compose stories that teach about, for instance, if one were to look at the life of a great Lama and really admire and respect that Lama, if one were to compose a story about the life of that Lama and give that story to others as a way to increase their faith, that would be a very, very powerful thing to do. That would be a very virtuous thing to do. So composition, offering. The saying is that if one were to offer a butter lamp with great faith every day to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, just one simple butter lamp, every day with great faith, visualizing that as being all the offering that one could have, then one would be accumulating the causes for Buddhahood in some future time. Generosity, you heard that from the children this morning. Kindness to others. Kindness even at the expense of your own comfort, because there are more of them than there are of you. Caring for others and their well-being, considering them important and precious. Attentiveness, that is attentiveness during teachings, sometimes hard to do when you really want to go outside or fall asleep. Recitation, that is the recitation of prayers and practices and mantras. Memorization, obviously the memorization of the teaching and remembering, the particular details and how to practice. Teaching others, which we hope we do only when we're ready. Praying, contemplation, and that is contemplating the teachings that you hear now. If you were to take this home and think about it, really contemplate on it, then that would be a very virtuous activity. And meditation. These are the causes that bring about Buddhahood. So hearing about them, we can practice them in the way, first of all, we can receive training as to how to practice them, and then we can practice them accordingly as well as we can. Some people will spend, the whole week contemplating what they've heard here today. And then others, and some of them will just continue to think about it. Then others will walk out of here and it's like water off a duck's back. You better forget it. They won't think about it again until they come here again. But they come back, and there's virtue in doing that. And according to what you have done, really I tell you, the ball is in your court. According to what you have done, that will be the result that you have. There's no magic about it. It's not like, oh great one, how can I receive the great wisdom? It isn't like that. It's how hard you work. That's how much progress you will make. It's consistent, and it's just that way. How well you take hold of your mind, how much you demand of yourself, how courageous you are, how honest you are, how much true generosity you develop. Accordingly, you will make progress. Accordingly, you will pacify the obstacles that keep you from achieving the awakening to your own primordial wisdom nature. It's just like that. Really, no magic.